Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler talks with the Fox 12 Investigates team about enforcing the city's homeless camping ordinance.
Well, this comes after a public disagreement with the Multnomah County Sheriff last week over whether people who violate the camping ordinance should be booked in jail.
Mayor Wheeler told us that he remains steadfast in connecting those experiencing homelessness to services as one of his top priorities. But he was pretty stern when he said he will continue to push for consequences for those who violate camping ordinance rules and pose a threat to those around them. This comes after Portland police say they arrested a man last week for unlawful camping. Officers took him to jail, but Multnomah County Sheriff's deputies there refused to book him. This led to a very public disagreement between Mayor Wheeler and the sheriff, Nicole Morris O'Donnell. She released a statement saying the correction system should be used as a place for people who pose a danger to the public, not those living unsheltered. The mayor tells us tonight that shortly thereafter, he and the sheriff spoke to clear the air, and they released a joint statement late last week. In it, they said the sheriff's office was provided more data designed to provide clarity on camping ordinance enforcement. Wheeler said the city will still be issuing citations.
So we're doing something that is slightly different. I have directed the Portland Police Bureau to continue to offer citations for that very, very small fraction of people who just simply refuse to follow common sense rules, like no fires near structures, no blocking emergency exits, no blocking ADA ramps and other means of egress into businesses or into houses. For that small percentage, we're going to cite them. We're taking them to a precinct office where they are held until all of their paperwork is completed.
Wheeler also went on to say in the months leading up to the camping ordinance going into effect, he had no idea where the disconnect happened between his team and the sheriff's office. He says expectations were clearly communicated about those who violate the ordinance dealing with criminal consequences. And in their joint statement, both the mayor and the sheriff stressed that both of their priorities is getting people on the streets connected to services and getting them the help they need before any citation or arrest might occur. In their joint statement last week, the mayor and the sheriff said once everyone gets more on the same page after sharing information, she and the mayor will meet late next week to discuss the issue further. In downtown Portland, Adrian Thomas, Fox 12 Oregon.